According to the internet, I'm live. Hi everyone. Just while we're waiting here, everyone hear me out in cyberspace, all that fun stuff. Says my stream health isn't great. I'll try this anyway. Can you hear me out there? Anyway, so welcome back. Past couple times we've talked about making stuff in Notch, and now we're going to talk about playing with Notch with other applications. So Notch as itself you can use as a standalone and play back to another screen and be fine. But one of the super powerful things with Notch is you can export to other apps. And just by default, you can go project, compile block for media server, and it'll play. However, chances are you're probably going to want to get some info in and out of Notch. So we're going to talk about that today. Going to start off with a little bit of a blank project here, and then I'm going to do the magic Food Network style gotcha reveal. Because I have a little bit of a pre-built thing already for us here. So I'm going to just start off here, build a basic patch. Video, image plane. I've actually got to use an image 2D because I'm lazy right now. So, say we have our video. Here we got our video, and let's say we have a, can't type today, color. I've got correction. I'm going to put a basic color correction on this video. And what we're going to want to do, let's desaturate that. Basic IMAG look. And this is very minor, but we're just using it to show an example. To expose a parameter in Notch is actually super easy. You can click, there's two ways you can do it. You can click the node you're looking at, and you can come over to this menu here and click the little question mark, and it brings up this window, and from there you can hit expose property and name it and such. So if we want to expose our saturation, it would be under the group color correction, and it would show up in the media server as such. That's great for one layer, one look. However, I don't like to do that because when you're dealing with multiple layers in a Notch block across multiple looks, you're going to have saturation on one, maybe particle emission on another, speed on a third. What I like to do is I will generally, I'll do a bunch of generic parameters, and not math, I always screw up math modifier versus combiner. What I normally like to do is I will do a combiner, just because that happens to be the first one. I think the Notch manual actually tells you to do a envelope modifier. I forget what it actually says, but combiner works too. And what I'll normally do is I will expose the second value. So expose name, and I'll normally name them like we're going to do. I normally just go generic, and this is going back to like the mbox hippo day. So, you know, fx1, exposed group name, we can call it whatever we want. I forget what it's even called in my other one. Param. You also have this readable tab, which is used for AR, XR type stuff. We're not going to go into that today. What's nifty too is you have this unique identifier, which you can actually, if you hit reset, it defaults to it. But you can actually type in whatever you want here. But this actually comes into play later, which we will show. And that actually defines that specific parameter within the block. So we're actually going to leave that alone. If you really want, I've seen people type in the same name as the parameter, but you don't have to. But so then you have that into your range remap, and then I like to pipe that into whatever we need to control, so like something like saturation, for example. This is super simple, and I also like to do a comment, and I actually didn't talk about this on the last one at all. There are comment blocks. I try not to rename the nodes themselves because it bothers me when that is. You can, however, come in here and do that if you want to. You can actually rename combiner to fx1, for example. But then you don't necessarily know what that is, even if you, the only way to really see what that is if you come up top here, which isn't very intuitive to me. I like being able to look at my node graph and say, okay, it's a video loader, that's an image, that's a whatever. So that's the main one. The other thing with that, which you can't do separately, is the video loader. So if you want to bring a texture in or out of your media server, I'm just going to keep saying disguise because that's what I work in normally, or D3. But this applies to Hippo or any of the other ones as well, AI. You click the same deal, you just expose your video loader, done. Close that out. So that's the basics of it. And then same thing, I normally actually, as I said in the other videos, I normally will go into a video null first. This was just kind of a sloppy definition. So we're going to magically alt-tab, or crap, I closed it. We're going to magically come over here, and we are going to load the demo block that I've been working on for you guys. The other thing worth noting, since we have shown it here, or not shown it here, depending on how we want to think about it, is audio. So I talked about it on the first video, but it's going to reiterate because we're talking about exporting. If you go up to devices, audio devices, it's the same. There's a cat on my table, so just a heads up, guys. You don't need to expose audio. Audio is actually handled internally within the block, and it's controlled within these the audio MIDI devices tab here. So we're going to go make sure again we're in our Avid MADI USB. The Dante USB receive is from my other computer, so we're going to go ahead and delete that. It's also worth reiterating the use ASIO and exported block. You probably want to check that if you're doing audio reactive. However, it is worth noting that if you are doing ASIO audio in your media server, that this will not work. One of them will fight for the other one, and I think normally D3 wins because it's the first thing to initialize. However, I normally have been doing WDM, but it is worth noting that D3 is pushing you to use ASIO more and more now. So we have that. So this block actually has a couple layers in it. And I normally, when I'm going out to a media server, I will do my first layer as a total bypass. Just literally video texture pass through. This kind of goes into the conversation of if you happen to fat finger something or anything like that, you'll just get clean IMAG to the screen, and I've said it so many times, no one's ever been fired for clean IMAG. So this actually is kind of my default look. There's a couple of versions of this, but I normally bring in two inputs. I'll bring in what I call the video camera, which really isn't a good name for it, but video cam, and video texture is kind of my other way that I normally default to, which has nothing plumbed right now, but if I'm feeding like a displacement map or something from another piece of content, I just like to have both always active, and you'll see why as I come into D3 here. Basic camera, and then I have 8 parameters. Some of my blocks I do have 16 in them, some of them have 8. Depends on the show, honestly. Some shows there's a lot of parameters exposed, some shows there's not. Your mileage may vary. For this, though, I do kind of try to keep them similar. So, like, a lot of times I'll always call FX1 on my device. I'll call that clean. So I'll always have a wet-dry mix if I need it. Again, kind of dealer's choice. There are a couple people, namely, I don't know if Jackson or any of those guys are watching the pickle patch. I think if you Google it, it'll come up. Might not want to Google that, actually. That they've kind of tried to standardize their parameter. I think theirs is 12 parameters and a couple color values. Do what works for you. The big thing of note, though, once you start getting into the sock puppet workflow within Disguise, once you add parameters, you have to re-export the profile, which we're going to do hopefully a video on here soon, as I have acquired a lighting console, which makes me very happy. Thank you, Control Freak, if anyone from Control Freak's watching. But that matters in sock puppet because you have to re-export your profile every time you add a new exposed parameter. When you're dealing with timeline, it doesn't really matter as much. It's just annoying. Anyway, rant over on that point. So we have our bypass layer. The other thing I like to do on these blocks is I will do another layer that is a value as text. You'll see this value as text, which literally just takes a value and makes it a text string, and then some text geometry, so you can quickly, within your media server, verify control. I also, on that same kind of layer, will also do this is a audio test, which currently has no audio going to it. So I like the same thing, that I can quickly flash this up on screen and go, okay, yep, channel 1, good. And channel 2, good. Just, again, quick verify everything's talking, because nothing's worse than troubleshooting and realizing that, audio's muted on their end or something like that. Also, because I told him I would make sure it made its way into the stream, this is my other fun test. If you guys know Fuji, Fantastic LD made this after someone sent me a photo of him in a bunny suit. I blame Dearson. So also in this block, we have basic iMag Look 1. And these are just kind of copied and pasted from a show. This one has 0 parameters exposed. We have another one that I have mapped. I have a clean. I have this mapped to my glow intensity, and I have this one mapped to my noise amount. Then we have this one, which has some things mapped to the streaks. I don't have a clean on this one. I'm sloppy. But the clean, I don't always do the clean. I actually normally do the clean as another layer in the media server, which I'll get into in that tutorial. This one has some old crap in it that, like I say, it doesn't have anything. This one has a bunch in it. This is actually one of my favorite iMag looks. I've never actually gotten into a show. And yes, it's supposed to be that stuttery. It looks really cool with the camera. I think this one has anything. Yeah, this one. So this one, if you guys look, doesn't have any of those combined blocks, which and this one's an audio one, which again, ditto, you don't need. You actually don't necessarily decombine or any of those parameters. Ditto for this one. I thought I had, or this one. I thought I put some parameters in here. Did I not save? Apparently I didn't save. Whoops. I was working on this earlier and failed. So that being said, not every layer needs all the parameters. They'll still show up, but normally I like to just have them all in there just to be safe. But back to the UUID thing. Whenever I'm making a new layer, I'll start off with my base layer for the show. You can just copy that and come over here and paste it, and you get this dialog box. This dialog box will ruin your day. Make exposed properties unique. So what this does is it says, oh, you're copying and pasting exposed parameters, and those all have UUIDs. Do you want those to match? Or do you want us to give them new ones? And it's asking if you want it to give us new ones, which normally you want to hit no. I'm going to hit yes to show you guys something, though. So we have our new layer. We have our video. This disconnects when I copy and paste. I haven't fixed that. And for the hell of it, let's go. Just for throw some. And actually, while we're at it, we may as well break up the map 021. Break up the map. Break up the map. Yep, 021. Oh, the other thing of note on these combiners that I have in my block, I've gone in and you can define your min-max. So this forces the media server to always accept that value between 0 and 255. That's currently a remnant of 8-bit DMX from an old sock puppet workflow. That can be whatever you want it to be, but because of that, my range remap is expecting a 0 to 255. I think Disguise has moved to floating point, and I think Hippo treats it as a float as well. But that's just kind of legacy pre-sock puppet workflow for me. Anyways. Over on your right-hand side by default in Notch, though, you have a couple tabs that are super useful. You have your node graph, which hopefully you should know by now. Profiler, which is used for debugging and shows you what everything's doing, which can also be super helpful, which we can get into. But then you have these exposed tabs. You have exposed and exposed. I don't know why there's a second one. But what this does is this actually shows you everything that's exposed in your project. And it shows you, as you can see here, it shows you per UUID. So, for example, if I expand this one, you will, cat. Everyone meet Drusilla? Drusilla's a good cat. Except for when she walks over my streaming keyboard. Anyway, I'm sorry, I was saying, you have this FX1, but if you see here, I have, and actually, I did this in the block to show you a point to begin with, without even knowing it. You have FX1, but if you note, there's 3 of these here. They are all named FX1. These all have 1, these have a 2 and a 3 on them. It does tell you what layer they're in, so right now it's bypass, bypass 2, and it's saying this one's in bypass 3, which is my new layer, and this one's in audio testing. But the media server will only address the first one. So what you need to do is you need to make sure all these match. What you could do is you can actually go into per layer and copy that UUID and repaste it into the new one. Or you can simply click and drag these 2 up and they will auto redo that. So quick task before you're done with your block, or before you export your block, you just make sure these all, you only have 1 for each of these. Or else it'll still show up in your media server, you just won't have control over it, and you'll be pulling your hair out until you go back. So normally when you copy and paste those values, you want to hit make exposed parameters unique. No, unless you have a specific reason to do otherwise. My order is out of order here, which some media servers care about the order, some don't. Disguise, it'll just kind of pick its own order. I don't think you can reorder these yet. Can you? This was a big conversation for a while. Oh, you can. I don't know if that actually does show up in the block. But then also you see down here I have my videos cam, video texture. So you just want to make sure that they're all there. And as you can see, not all my layers have this, as you can tell, which isn't the worst thing. The other thing on this block, which you can see I have exposed, which I didn't mention, is I do have a downsample in some of these nodes. And what that does is that takes my IMAG source and basically either halves or quarter reses it. So if it's a heavier block and I don't want to be doing as much processing, I do that on some of them just as a kind of default, get more performance out of the box if needed. Some other things to note when you are exporting to media server, depending on what you're doing, I always like to just go to my project settings. Layer capture separate effects, video capture and exported block, you don't want that. Network editing enabled, you can actually log in to Notch, or to the Notch block that's running on the server and do some editing, which we'll get into in another video. Web GUI enabled, you don't want that enabled. That gives you a web GUI for when you're doing a standalone app. We don't care about that right now. What else is there? There's a couple other good ones that you want to... we don't care about Oculus Rift. You want to make sure ArtNet and ArtNet, none of these you want enabled, basically. You don't want ArtNet, you don't want OSC. There's some notes in the Notch manual if you're dealing with Connect or RealSense or anything like that. Basically, only one block is allowed to access them. But that's easy, and we really don't care about that for right now. What's that one here? Oh, the other thing too, make sure under devices, video in, you want to make sure send to NDI is disabled, because that will actually broadcast NDI from the server, which could be bad. Ditto with Spout, unless we explicitly want to do Spout, which we're actually going to get to hopefully in another video dealing with Resolume, as that's our preferred method to get to Resolume. So we have our block. Oh, the other thing on this this parameters block, which I like to do, a lot of the media servers, I don't think any of the media servers actually support versioning like they do for content. So I like to put a version number or a date just as a text field in the block somewhere. So if I need to, I can quickly reference and say, okay, which version of the block does the server have? If they're all, because they're all named the same, and occasionally things get juggled. Ditto with my email address, so everyone can spam me, I guess. Not that too many people are stealing Notch blocks, I don't think, but I would like to think that if someone found this and saw an email that wasn't who they thought it was, they would email me. Copy protection in Notch is a whole different conversation. but it is worth mentioning. And that being said, don't steal other people's notch blocks. Bad karma. Also on that note, as you can see on the right-hand side of this block, you can actually go in and in your preference, not exit, in preferences, if you enter in your name up top, it will actually append it into the project, and that also will follow the project. So if somewhere in this project I had a control freak file, which is great, and somewhere I looked at Rowan Glenn's project, which somehow made its way into my project, so and that forever sticks with the project. So if they do get a hold of your file, they can at least, you get some credit. But other than that, it's pretty simple. You just want to make sure everything is exposed correctly and that you're not having any duplicate sources, because they won't show up in the media server. But then you want to go, well, first off, you want to save, because always save, except for that time I didn't. And then you want to go compile block from media server. This used to have a 32-bit option. It doesn't anymore. Then you just have to go browse. So for me, we're going to start talking about this within D3 Disguise. We're going to go to our projects, notch stream, and by default it goes into objects, notch file. I already have it in here. I'm just going to override it just for the sake of what we're doing. Do I want to replace it? Yes, to do. I'm going to save out of this. I guess I can leave it running. So to play back notch on a media server, you need a notch license. By default, the Notch Builder Pro gives you 4K. I think the base builder gives you 1080, but there are also dedicated playback licenses for Notch. The D3 hardware, the GX range comes with them built in, and you can also get a standalone hardware key for other media servers. The pricing for the playback is significantly cheaper than the builder, and I think they're doing that even weekly now. I haven't looked into it in a while. But the builder dongle will also give you a playback. It is also worth noting, as many people are doing this new based on the recent COVID shenanigans, that you do get a watermark on PLE and I think Builder Basic. There's another. Some of the outputs are watermarked, and ditto with the playback. You get a watermark playback license with PLE and one of the other versions. You can check it out on their site. Which, that being said, there is commercial time. Disguise and Notch are both still offering free licenses. Disguise through September, Notch, the PLE, I think is free, minus the dongle forever. Go download it, go learn. Yeah, so we are going to launch our D3 project. Hopefully. Yep, there we go. Ooh. This worked earlier. Crap. Stand by. Oh, crap, I know what I need to do. Stand by, guys. This worked earlier, and of course now it's not because I... So just letting you guys know what's going on at home. I am streaming. My laptop's rendering at 60, but I can only capture 30 into my capture, so it just decided it didn't want to play nicely. So we're going to try that again, because Disguise took over full screen and decided it wanted to be 60. So we're going to try windowed mode and hope that fixes it, because I could have sworn I did this earlier and it was fine. Good, we're still on Disguise. Yeah, so per Kevin, Kevin chimed in the chat there about my licensing and what that looks like. The other thing of note is with the PLE files are forever marked as PLE. Notch can undo that. However, I think it's only a one-time thing when you purchase a base or a license. So we're in Disguise. We have our base project here where there's many other videos about working through Disguise. Shout out to Chet if he's watching. Chat with Chet. I highly recommend it. He's been doing a fantastic job. I think he's going live tomorrow at noon. Always worth checking out for an introduction to Disguise. It's my media server of choice for those of you that don't know me. I'm planning on also talking about Notch in Hippo at some point, hopefully this week, and Notch in Resolume as well. So I do want to try to cover all the major bases, or maybe even AI if Josh is watching. So to get a layer, or to get Notch into D3, you want to go do a layer, search Notch, and by default it's inactive. Effects, we're going to select our demo block, and it will initially hang, or will it? Did they fix that? Let's see. Inactive. Oh, because I'm going to the mapping. So it's worth noting in Disguise, there we go. So we do our mapping to our surface. Notch renders to whatever its mapping is. So if let's do Notch feeds. We're going to make a feed map, but just for the sake of conversation here, surface 1. Go 19, I can't type. 1080. So doing a feed size of 1920 by 1080 in Notch, or in this layer, will force Notch to render at, there we go, add feed rectangle. So by default, you see white in Notch. That's because it's trying to show me a video that isn't there. There's a couple ways we can get video into Notch in Disguise. You can go video cam texture and pick a texture, which there really aren't any useful ones for us because they're static images. Or you can see by default it goes to arrow input, and what that's expecting is it's actually expecting another layer from Disguise. So we're actually going to call this, we're going to put this below by doing Control-Alt arrow down. I'm going to rename this to be, and you guys can't, I just realized you can't see this because it's, my little pip is over it. I'm going to move my pip over here for right now. So move my pip over there. Doing a video layer, we're going to rename this Notch Cam. And I'm going to make it, got to duplicate that and call that Notch Texture. And then within Disguise, what you want to do is you hold in Alt and you click the source layer and you drag it up to the destination. As you can see, that turned black. And we're going to do it for both of them actually. So now if you look on the Notch layer, it'll say video cam texture arrow input, video cam arrow to Notch cam. And this is actually new in R17.1 where you can select the arrow as well. You used to kind of have to bend it to your will. The other thing of note, which some of us were talking about, you can also now within the Notch pre-comp texture, you can pipe a pre-comp texture into it. So instead of doing the what I'm going to call the normal arrows, you could also go Notch Cam, and then you could pipe this guy to the Notch Cam texture, Notch Cam direct, and there you see I get the virtual yellow arrow. I actually haven't done this on a show yet. It makes a ton of sense when you think about it. It's a new workflow that's unfortunately only been out since the beginning of the year, and the world kind of shut down before I got a chance to use it on a show. Not sure how it's going to relate. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead here and give this my favorite video that I've watched 1,000 times. I'm going to just split this section for now. And actually I don't know if Chet's watching me. I generally like to start my beginning of my timeline in black just in case fat fingers, etc. So we're actually going to bring this over here. So we have our Notch. It's rendering slowly because my computer hates me. But by default, we go to our Notch layer bypass. And then within Disguise, you just get to pick your layer as you would any other timeline effect. Multicolor streaks. And from that, you have, if you notice below here, you have these FX controls. And these, in theory, are linked to, look at that. They are linked to the parameters we linked them to within Notch Builder. And from here within Disguise, you can, keyframe all of your favorite workflow. And also, if we Alt-tab back to Disguise, you can see FX controls, FX1 lines up to FX controls, FX1, 2, 3. I've got my pips over there. I don't know where my pip wants to be in this. So if you go FX1, 2, 3, it lines up to Disguise, FX1, 2, 3, 4. So that's pretty basic. That's the majority of your Disguise workflow. It is worth noting then too that if you go into your patch assignments and you would patch this as a sock puppet layer, each layer or each notch block within Disguise kind of gets its own unique DMX personality. So you can see here that it actually doesn't. Oh, it shows you UID now. That's new. So it shows all of your parameters and what they are, and then you can also. Can you not export? Oh, it's down. They hit it. You can also export this to a MA2 format, and it will write all of your fancy layer names and all your parameters into MA, which will be another video. So, the other thing of note with this, as we talked about, since I really didn't go over it at the beginning, I do generally per show try to keep it to one notch block. Loading multiple notch blocks within Disguise uses up resources and potentially makes it unhappy. So you want to kind of reduce your resources as much as you can there, unless you have good need to do or to have multiple blocks. The other thing of note, actually, since we didn't look at it yet, let's have a look and confirm our audio works. Where's my option? Why is that not showing up? That's interesting. I'm using bitmap fonts, which might be part of it. That's no. Broke it. Did I break it because I alt-tabbed out of it? So, yeah, this is some live troubleshooting. Let's see what we broke here and go back to our notch layer. And step 1, can I get a texture through? No, I can't. Oh, I turned the alpha down. How did I do that? Oh, because I unsock puppeted it, that's why. So, troubleshooting. Because sock puppet by default wants it to be 0. So let's go to our audio test. And, yep, audio test works. Zach's asking how much can it update. So, updating a block. Order matters. So even if you cut a look, don't delete it from the block. I mean, you could theoretically delete all the node graph, but if you, say for example here, coming back, if I delete this purple layer, it will actually shift the index of all the other ones up 1, so everything will be shifted 1, and that would be bad. Ditto with inserting layers. You want to insert everything at the end. Updating a block mid-show will actually force the server to reload it, which is bad. The server will hang, your output will hang, people will yell, you'll get blamed for everything, and the world will end. Not that that's really anything new today, but that being said, yeah, always add stuff at the end. Don't delete anything from the layer or from the block once it's been programmed. The other thing, as I said earlier in the beginning, is the parameters, if you add, will have to do a re-export of the DMX profile for the MA, which will shift channels. Your lighting programmer will throw things at you. Yeah, just don't do it. Yeah, and that's, I mean, and the other thing of note that I guess we didn't talk about, because I just never think about it, if you come back to Notch Builder, you'll see some of these things are red. What the red means, well, the red means it's missing, but the which I don't know what that's missing from. But the orange means it's an external resource, and what that means is it will not be embedded in the block. So by default, Notch will embed any form of resources that you use in your project in the block, except video files. So it'll, if you're using, like you can see here, I have some fonts, I have some DDS compressed textures, I have a black PNG, and I have a LUT in there. Those are all embedded. This video is not, because it's expecting me to play that externally. If you're doing I don't know if the standalone apps embed the video, or if they just look for it on the hard drive, but you can click and you can hit do not embed resource, and it defaults that for video, which we obviously don't need to embed this because the media server is playing it. And it's exposed. That being said, when you are doing any form of it, if you are doing an external video within Notch, like if you're feeding a bump map or something like that, you want to let the media server play it, because Notch will play it back CPU, which is bad and slow compared to the media server doing it in its native pipeline and keeping it on GPU, and you're happy there. But so by default, it does embed everything else but video. So you don't have to worry about a form of resource management. It also embeds that in the project file as well. So if you'll see bigger project files, that'll be why. It's also good to note in there that if you go, you can right-click and you can go remove unused resources, and it'll delete what's not in use. So I think it just got rid of that LUT that I'm not using. Ditto for merge resources by file name. Just general block maintenance there. But all your assets should stay with the block. Yeah, I think that's basically it. Any questions for anyone? Just letting my humble viewers know, I am planning on doing a further in-depth disguise video, as well as a Hippo and Resolume one, and then probably going to get into some console workflow, sock puppet, as well as general philosophy of media server programming. I know Manny did a stream the other day about that, but I wanted to do my take on it. And kind of how I approach a video show, both as in a rock and roll concert environment with, iMac heavy Notch, as well as a more clubby show where you're punting effects and punting VJ stuff within Resolume or D3. So yeah, any questions? I'm going to watch the chat here for a minute and see, as the default YouTube, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Yeah. I totally forgot to turn my lights on. Oh well. And signing off.